Hey funnel builders, Mike Killen here from sellyourservice.co.uk. So what happens when your customers ask really dumb questions like, why aren't I at the top of Google yet? Why haven't we made any sales yet? Why do I have so few followers? What we're going to do today is talk about how to handle ludicrous customer complaints and those dumb questions that customers send in when their expectations are way too high. And I've kind of summarized it there already, so you don't have to watch the rest of the video. A lot of the time it's because customer expectations are far higher than they should be, considering the amount of time or effort that's taken into consideration already. For example, how has it ever happened to you, and let me know in the comments if this has happened, where a customer, you've launched their website or their funnel and they've gone and clicked Google even that day and they're like, why aren't I at the top yet? Now, aside from being infuriating, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of what they expect out of the internet. I think part of it, it's not entirely their fault. Part of it comes from the fact that everything happens so quickly on the internet now. I mean, you can even get next or same day delivery for a lot of things on Amazon now. So I can understand why they would believe that you could appear at the top of Google instantaneously. However, a lot of it is also they don't really understand the nature of those transactions. Amazon will deliver to me same day because I'm paying them. Google, I don't pay Google to get to the top of Google unless I use AdWords, and even then it could take a day or two to come through. But they have to test whether my content is going to be worth sending people to. The reason it takes a long time to get to the top of Google for certain keywords is basically because Google ultimately doesn't trust you, or doesn't trust your content. But this is also a big question of time. Again, it's a case of a lot of the time I still get customers now say to me, Mike, how is it that you get 2,000 or 3,000 views a month? Which is still, I mean, it's 4,000 now, but it's still, that's minuscule in comparison to what some of the other guys are getting. And I'm like, well, have you published blog content every single day for the past year, or every single week for the past 2 years, or produced a video a day for the past year? No, you haven't. And they go, well, I don't really know if I want to be able to put that kind of effort in. There have to be a kind of a series of questions you need to be able to ask back to your customers when they come to you with things where you think, what are you talking about? Followers, traffic, listings on Google, and sales are some of the most common ones. And the way that I like to deal with that is, as I mentioned, come back to them with a series of questions on why they think that would be appropriate. First of all, if for some reason in your contract you guaranteed that you could get someone to the top of Google, first of all, why did you do that? Secondly, you can absolutely say, yeah, we're going to help you reach this goal or this result. 100,000 followers, 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, 10,000 people on your email list, top of Google for, these keywords. We're going to work towards that. But there's no guarantee there. At least there shouldn't be, because you can't guarantee that result. You can work towards it and do everything you can to build that result. It's also a reason why we only work with certain businesses, because to get a brand new website from a brand new company that's never produced content straight to the top of Google for things that aren't just their brand, their business name, can take a lot of time. Even now I have customers say to me, oh, well, are we getting enough traffic? And I think, well, no, we're not, but you haven't given it enough time. So I have to ask those questions. It's usually a case where I haven't set their expectations properly, and I kind of have to reflect back, and I have to ask them, when do you think this would happen? When did you think this would happen? And it's a very important question to ask when there's any kind of question where their expectations aren't being met, is to first ask them, when did you think that this was going to happen? Like, what indication did I give to you that this would happen sooner rather than later? And often they'll actually go back and go, oh, I kind of didn't. I just assumed. And that's a really dangerous kind of path to go down, because you need to be able to check with them, okay, are there any other assumptions that you're making about the business or about what we're working on, because I need to know them. I need to know what you're assuming, because I might not be able to deliver against what your expectations are. They might just assume that you can get them to where they need to go, which technically you're right, but if their assumption is a very specific vision and you know that you're working towards another place, that disconnect between those two things, that's going to make it very hard to deliver on. When it comes to things like sales, and let's say that you've built out the campaign, you've built out the email campaign, the remarketing campaign, the sales pages, all this kind of stuff, and they're not generating any sales. 99.9% of the time, first of all, and this goes for the same for lead magnets and opt-ins as well. It's hardly ever the actual product. It's usually the offer or the message. So if you sell a book, it's not the book that's not making the sale, it's the message and the offer that isn't making the sale. So to go back into that and have a look and say, okay, we're clearly not meeting your expectations. How soon did you think we would start doing this? And they might come back with saying, well, we assumed it would be instantaneous. And the rule of thumb is you never want to bring out the contract. As stupid as that sounds, you never want to bring out your contract or your agreement or the proposal, because that usually means the relationship is broken down. Sometimes we will bring out the proposal to say, okay, let's have a redo of our project management, kind of the proposal that we sent you. I just want to be clear. I want to see where you've interpreted that we would get this result within 24 hours or 48 hours. And this is why we write this stuff up, why it's very important to have this stuff written down. Now, if you can guarantee some kind of sale within 48 hours, then write it down if you can guarantee that. If you can't, then obviously don't. But if the customer is unhappy for some reason, and they think, why haven't I got this result yet, or why haven't I got that? You need to ask them, please explain to me, and you need to do it in the highest level, least confrontational manner possible. Please explain to me where I said or where we wrote down or where we agreed that this would happen, either at all or where it would happen within your time frame. What you might find is that you might upset a couple of customers who are in this position. If their expectations are already sky high and you haven't matched them because you haven't checked in with their assumptions and what their goals are, usually that's because you haven't taken the time to go through it. That's fine. Everyone makes that mistake at some point. It's not the end of the world. We can get around that. But you need to handle this relationship better going forward. It might turn out that this customer actually has a real problem with having crazy wild expectations. And usually, for example, we've got a customer their expectations are always really, really high. They're great to work with, but they expect a lot of everyone else because they expect a lot of themselves. But also what we find is that if they don't match that expectation within 24 hours or at most a month, and that to them is a lifetime, is an eon, is a month. They'll then go, well, let's try something else. I happen to know that you need to commit to something for a year, 2 years, 3 years, completely doing the same thing over and over again before you'll start seeing massive levels of return and massive levels of results. A really common area that we find that this is causing a lot of problems for with funnel builders at the moment is with Facebook campaigns. They'll say, well, I see all these internet gurus getting 10-cent clicks and then growing their email list by 1,000 people a day. Why haven't we got this yet? Now, we don't actually do a lot of Facebook campaign management for our customers. We do a little bit, but we tend to outsource that to another business. But I have spoken to other funnel builders who do this, and they say the reason why customers think this is because of all the internet gurus telling them they should do it. The reason the internet gurus can do this is probably because they've been doing it for 5 years non-stop, testing it on and on and on and on and on. We still haven't tested our market, is what you should be saying, and if it's not clear to the customer that they do need to test things and things aren't going to go well all the time, that might be an indication that they haven't got as much money as they expected. Their budget might be lower than they realized. At its core, this is all about setting and managing expectations. The more we've got written down at the front, the more we've got written down at the start of the project, the more likely the customer's expectations are going to be very well managed. My biggest fear, and the thing that I hate doing more than anything, is when a customer has got this unspoken assumption that has never come up, and all of a sudden they think, well, why haven't we got followers on Twitter yet? Or why hasn't our Facebook group got 1,000 members in it yet? I'm like, where has this come from? What are you talking about? I think one of our biggest failures was about how a customer was expecting to sell a lot of courses. And I'm happy to admit that, I've fucked up campaigns and funnels before, and they've kind of given us all these different courses and products and things like this. But what's ended up happening is we made no sales, made literally no sales. And when I looked into it, I realized I had missed out an enormous part. They didn't have an email list. So I was essentially selling to no one. We had a campaign running out, pushing people over, trying to get them to sell, trying to get them to buy this stuff, and we were trying to push this out to an email list. And when I say they didn't have an email list, what I mean is they had bought it. I had wrongly assumed that their email list of 12,000 people was people that they had manually gathered from other customers over the years. And in fact, it was just an email list that they had bought. And I know that doesn't work. Buying email lists does not work. So if you're still doing it, you need to stop doing it. That was my assumption that I had made wrong, because I didn't realize that he had bought the list. But because I didn't realize he had bought the list, I was telling him numbers based on our conversion rates of previous customers. 12,000 customers, we should be able to sell 10% of them. So that's 1,200 customers. The course was around $1,000. So that should have been $1.2 million. But it wasn't. We didn't make any sales because it turns out that it was a complete... the email list was bought. It wasn't part of an opt-in campaign. So a lot of it is about their assumptions and your assumptions. The more you've got written down on the front end, the more you spend time discovering, which is why it also makes sense to do paid discovery sessions to say, look, we've done this a lot. It's $1,000 discovery session. I want to make sure that we don't waste either of our time. You can keep all of the data and the reports on the back end. I'll go into that in another video, but ultimately that's how you deal with dumb customer questions and customer complaints, when really none of it was your fault. It was nothing to do with your business. It was all to do with them, but it is your responsibility. And that's the big takeaway here, is it might not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. And if you want to keep that relationship going with the customer, you have to make sure you can do everything you can to mitigate any of those results and assumptions made. Cool. Well, if you've ever had a disaster story where a customer's made crazy, wild assumptions, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to read them. I'll try and put a couple of mine in there as well. I've probably got a couple of videos either side of my head to do with managing customers, depending on what it is that they are dealing with within their business. Maybe I'll do one on should you write content for your customers' funnels. That's one of the I'll put there. And I'll also put a different type of funnel build that you could try out here. In the meantime, guys, thanks very much. I'm Mike from sellyourservice.co.uk. Keep building those funnels.